What's up, everybody? This week on the show, we got a very special guest. Her name is Heather Griffith. She's a friend of Marcy and I's. We met on social media. She had asked some questions about a friend of hers who's an alcoholic, and she reached out to me to ask me about some recovery stuff. So it's a good conversation. It's not really a recovery conversation. It's more about, I guess you'll just have to listen to find out. Hope you enjoy the show. Give us a like, give us a follow. Thanks so much for your support. Appreciate you. Namaste. Hey everybody, I'm Rex.
And I'm Reina.
And this week we have a very special guest. She's a friend of ours. It's kind of silly that we're doing it on Zoom because she lives like 2 miles away. But anyway, we got Heather Griffith. I met Heather on Facebook. She actually, I friended her up because I'm friends with her sister. And she checked me out and asked me questions about a friend of hers who is an alcoholic. And we've grown a friendship from there. And awesome. So, hey, Heather.
Hello. Good to see you guys on Zoom.
Hello. So glad to have you back. This is our take 2, everybody.
Oh,
we
yeah.
Had a glitch.
Yeah, we recorded an episode with Heather almost a month ago. And in the process of downloading it from the Zoom cloud to my computer, it ended up somewhere off in the ether. So this is take 2. And so how you doing?
I'm good. It's
Awesome.
kind of a crazy day. I got some sick kids at home, so they've been instructed to be silent, but we'll see how that works out. So if there's background
That's right.
noise,
We have dogs that bark at the slightest sound. So
we'll see.
all good. Kids,
Absolutely.
dogs,
They all bark at the slightest sound.
So Heather, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, what it is that you do, where you're from, how you live?
I'm from Fort Collins. I grew up here actually in this house, which is a long story about me being back, but involves me living in Boston for 4 years. Currently I'm a child and family therapist with a private practice here in town. For the 10 years before this career, I was running preschools. My degrees are all in early childhood mental health, and all of my grad school research in my master's program said that the best way to make community impacts on families was quality early childhood education. So I came back to Colorado from Boston and had been doing that. In the last 3 years, I have acquired 4 foster children who are great and will soon be mine. So we really needed a different work-life balance than running preschool and some other things that running your own business takes. So switch careers a little bit, but all the same work, really, really focusing on early childhood mental health. But then I'm also working on my doctorate in educational leadership and equality. And there I've been doing a lot of work on attachment, via cultural attachment, which came a lot from my work with critical thinking with kids over compliance and some other just areas that kind of all came to that. So it's kind of what we've been ending up talking a lot about, are those kind of areas. And they're really, pretty fun to talk about. So even though this is take 2, I'm happy to talk all the time about those soapboxes of mine.
So how did you end up with 4 foster kids?
2 of them were at the preschool and attending the preschool. And I talked with my husband at the time about foster care since like our second date. And it was an area that I'd worked in Boston. I worked at the foster care system and knew that I always kind of wanted foster kids and that, tough kids the troublemakers are really my favorites. And, that's an area that I can really make a difference in that I have experience and training working with bio parents and, child behaviors and trauma and those things. So didn't mean to get them at the timing I got them. I was going to be done with my doctorate first. We were going to take teenagers and younger children and, 4 wasn't the plan, but that's not how, kids work and families work and life works. And I feel like I'm the luckiest. They are so great. Definitely it's a lot for kids and now by myself, but worth every minute because they're definitely the best. So.
Yeah, that's an amazing part of your story that needs to be known. Also that you're getting this super special look at the inside workings of like all of this stuff too.
yeah, it's nice to have personal experiences, when I talk to other parents, and talk about it. Like I have all the training in the world and I don't get it right every time. So, it's not about being perfect. It's about being you and trying to have the best intentions. And, I can really talk about that from real spaces and not being perfect myself. So never having to expect that from parents and being able to share in a lot of things with them is helpful. And then, there's a lot with foster kids that translates to every family, and just, those feelings of disconnect sometimes and dysregulation sometimes, and, other things that, are really nice to be able to speak to, but also, first of all, help these kids through and them help me through, but just to have lived experience when looking at other kinds of research and how those things, truly come about and truly interact. And between my 4 kids and then also, running preschools, there's a lot of myths out there about education, especially early childhood, and how that should go. And, living in that space and knowing the real answers to that and really what happens on the ground is very helpful. So, yeah, I think it's the best of both worlds in a lot of ways.
I think it's awesome. There's so many scumbags who are in the foster care system just to get a check every month. At least where I'm from.
Yeah, I mean, it's that can be a thing for sure. It's not, if you're spending the money as you should be spending it, on the kids, it's not, you're definitely spending more money than you're getting reimbursed on the kids. But there are definitely people who don't spend the money that way, and or don't use their other kinds of resources wisely, and cause other kinds of issues. But I think most people are doing it for the right reasons. In Boston, I felt like when I worked with foster care parents, most people started for the right reasons. The system is broken, and broken in so many ways that are not helpful to foster parents. And, what I could always see with foster families was that if you were able to separate out, these are the systematic things that are going to drive me insane, and those might make it so that you can't be a foster parent anymore. I don't know. But those things are always separate from, if you can, separate from how you interact with the kids. So what you do with the kids does not have impact on the system. So the system is being crappy doesn't mean you give up the kids. The system being crappy doesn't mean the kids get punished for some reason. And people who could do that separation and that compartmentalization, they could last as foster parents. And those who could not and could stay, doing the things for the right reasons. But people who let that system really, which it's hard, and I've lived it, when the system messes with things and you're like, I cannot believe that. How can I keep doing this with somebody, dictating that about my parenting or about these kids or these things I know aren't good for kids, or, whatever the thing may be at the time. It's hard to say, how can I keep doing this? And, it's a different world than when it's your bio children. And when you say, how can I keep doing this? Your friends are all like, oh yeah, I know. But when you're a foster parent, you say, how can I keep doing this? Somebody says, well, you don't have to. And, it's like, well, and that's never been my boat. I can't live like that. Like, I will do all the things. That doesn't mean, when you're a foster parent, then there's at some points where you're working to get those kids home, which is no longer the case for my kids, but it's definitely a space that you have to be at a lot of times. And that's a different story. But other than that, like, I can't imagine doing this and, there being ever a point to give up just because the system is, it's definitely broken. It's definitely harsh, and definitely people have been like, well, then don't do it anymore. I'm like, that's not how children work. These are my kids, and it's tough, but that is a separate thing from parenting. So,
well, and that's that's one of the cultural influences that we're trying to parent within, right? Is this system, lots of systems, but that's one of them. And that's kind of a nice segue into your deeper work that you're doing, that Rex and I are so fascinated with and think is so important for everyone to kind of just like have this little seed planted, because I think this is really important information that's going to grow as time goes on and we understand more and more about this. And I'm actually, now that I'm aware of it, I'm starting to ping in the universe with other things. So I'm going to just start writing notes and sending them to you. Like, look what I found. Look what I found. All the stuff that you've talked about. So I'll let you talk about it because you can describe it way more eloquently than I can. But yes, these cultural influences on parenting, and how culture and parents or family of origin can possibly be there or not to support the development of the individual, which it's just so loaded. Like when you start thinking about it, there's so many different things. So yes, you please open this up for us.
So just to give I'll give a little like background path of how I got here research wise, because, you know, I think that there are some elements of that help. So I started my dissertation research saying for sure what I want to do is that I think these social emotional curriculums, you know, that are out there are not doing well on the diversity aspect, and really are written for, you know, white middle class families to be able to handle their problems. And I was like super on this. And then I got children that made me kind of stop my program for a little bit and start it back up again and those kind of things. And then a bunch of other people started working on that problem, and they've done a pretty good job addressing it in a lot of ways. And I was like, well, that's awesome. I could start my research over and still do what I was going to do. But one of my big things in doing that research was noting that we really didn't do a good job in any of those curriculums, but anywhere else, at really allowing kids to, you know, use critical thinking skills over compliance skills. And that is a really big soapbox of mine that it really bothers me, is that even all of the like testing that's out there, or the way to see if something is working or not, like one of these social emotional programs, is whether or not the kids in the class or the kids in the group are complying with everything. That is the measure of success. I do not like that at all. I don't think that we need to teach kids to comply. I think we need to teach kids to think critically. And so I, you know, started down this, like, really, we need to figure that part out. You know, it's not helpful really neuroscience wise between the ages of 4 and 6. You take all of the kind of brain cells, and your brain kind of decides which ones it's using and which ones the neural pathways it's not using. And then it gets rid of all those ones it's not using. So between the ages of 4 and 6, we don't teach kids how to think critically, and we just say, do what everybody else says. And we should definitely not be surprised within, you know, when they're 8, 9, 10, 11, that all they're doing is what everybody else says. We didn't teach them how to do anything else. And we specifically thought 4 and 6-year-olds don't know how to do that. We shouldn't give them opportunity to do that. They'll make things loud and messy and really hard for me. So let's teach them how to comply, because clearly they don't know how. And then they don't have these critical thinking skills because we specifically, during the time they needed them, said that they weren't ready. Turns out not true, and not helpful to us in the long run. We can reteach those things, and we do. And that's what we end up having to do, is restart over on teaching those critical thinking skills, or they miss it. And we have a lot of compliance, you know, for things that aren't helpful. So that's where I went initially, but then really wanted to connect back with some of this, you know, diversity thoughts. And what I noticed is that, you know, in those compliance measures and those social emotional learning tools and how they measured their success and those things, there was a whole section on this kind of compliance with identity piece. And what I realized is that the other thing that we don't teach in that, which helped me kind of narrow my research, was that in that giant bubble of not teaching critical thinking, is we don't teach kids how to form their own identities. We don't let them. If there's going to be parent-teacher conferences when kids are little, you know, sometimes in middle school, we'll let them have some part in it. But before that, we're not letting the kids say what they are really good at, or what they're proud of, or what they want to work on, or any of those things. That's not how that works. We say, these are the things you should be proud of. These are the things you should be, you know, maybe ashamed about, maybe feel guilty about, maybe just work harder on, you know, depending on how good the people are phrasing it. But then we don't let them do that. And then we expect that when they're, you know, 14, 16, 17, like, why don't they know anything about their own identity? Turns out we never let them have any control over their identity. We told them what was good and what was not good. That doesn't mean we don't want to teach them our values. This is my value on lying. This is my value on stealing. These are the consequences that are going to happen in this house. But what are you proud of, and what do you want to do? You know, we often dictate a lot of that to them until they're older. There is no reason why 2-year-olds, you can't show them their art projects for the last 6 weeks and have them tell you which ones they like better, or all the pictures you've taken of them in class or at home or anywhere, and have them pick those things. You can teach 5-year-olds how to make, you know, some smoothies with you. Obviously, you're not going to just give the 5-year-old a blender. That's not a good idea. But these are the things, and then let them choose the next time what goes into that, you know, into that smoothie. What do I like? it's not super difficult to let them have some agency over those things, but we don't really give them that agency over too much of that. We'll give them a couple of choices, but as far as values or personality things or things that they're proud of, we're not very good at letting them do that. So I went there, and they're like, we don't let people, let little people learn about and form their own identities. Really, we kind of put that on top of them. And then I heard a podcast, podcast script for a lot of things, that was talking about foster family who had a Native American child, and they were being told that they couldn't adopt this child because they weren't Native American, and Native American children need to have first, rights to their tribe gets first rights to them. And, listening to the debate in that podcast, which was really so focused on the parental attachment of that small child, the Native American child, and how much that parental attachment to that family that he'd been with for 2 years, the first 2 years of his life, should be honored and stuck with. And that made me start doing some research on, well, the thing is, he's not going to be two forever. There's a lot of kids who miss out on parental attachment, or you can really get some attachment skills in a lot of different ways and transfer those. But what about that cultural attachment? What about his, wanting to know about his tribe and wanting to know about that heritage and wanting to know where he comes from in that broader spectrum, in that, takes a village to raise a child, but also a village to, really help a child learn who they are, spectrum. So I started so that's kind of the path of my research, and ended up in this space where there is there's a little bit of new research out there that we are just starting to learn about, this cultural attachment kind of phenomenon, or way of thinking about attachments. And that is specifically that for some kids and adults, but some kids in this context have a really hard time attaching to one figure for a number of reasons. But a lot of it is just when they are afraid that one figure isn't strong enough to stand up for whatever. Maybe that's because of trauma that happened. That can for sure make that disconnect, but so can just the way that the world is kind of operated for them. It doesn't have to be a horrible reason. But one thing that doesn't change a ton is that cultural background, is that community background. And where does that come in? It's a lot of, it seems to be a lot of the reason that different kind of cultural aspects of some school systems work. So there's the Harlem Children's Zone in New York, and a lot of that is like, there's a lot of identity, based on being from Harlem in that space. And so, like, how does that play into being able to manage those curriculums and those outcomes a little bit better? Same thing with a lot of kinds of charter schools and religious schools. There's a religious community that comes behind that. And so being able to place your attachment in that culture, that broader, entity that isn't just one person, can make a lot of people feel more secure. And feeling more secure is really where you start for being able to make progress, being able to learn, being able to feel safe and grow. Really that hierarchy of needs, you need safety first. And so we really rely on saying all the time that kids need to have this parental attachment stuff down, but sometimes it's not parental attachment, it can be cultural attachment. But that means we got to let people learn about their culture. We got to be part of that. We got to, allow them to define that. And be okay with that, and be good with the differences that exist there. So that's kind of the journey of my research and where I've landed, and kind of where I'm seeing we need to change our thoughts a little bit.
Yeah, and I think this is just brilliant. Like, as far as within the context of the No Love podcast, and like trauma and childhood trauma and resiliency and blah 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 blah, on and on. To know that there's, potentially bigger containers other than like one fractured relationship, like that there may be multiple containers that could potentially contribute to the stability of someone as they're trying to become and grow.
Well, and recovery wise, so many of the people that I talk to, as far as in my therapy practice, who are recovering, like the recovery community is that for them. They are now, that is something that for them hasn't changed and hasn't diverted from, when they started, and they can always rely on that as a community to come back to. And there's so much of their values that are put into that. And that is where they lay that attachment. They didn't have the attachment before, or they broke all their attachments through addiction. And now they can, use this community. And that's not the community that everybody, is able to identify and be part of. That's super scary to some people, but for some people, that is how they do that. That is their, their new cultural identities as, in recovery for the rest of their life and being part of that recovery community. So I found that interesting.
And there's this huge body of research now that says that attachment is kind of the antidote for addiction. So especially that there's these mini cultures, subcultures where these people have figured out, right, how to be there for each other. It's beautiful. And I think it, there's so much potential, wonderful family lovey stuff that can happen with this information that you're coming out with, like how we can contribute to this like bigger container for one another. Like it's so amazing to me to think about that if that's a possibility, there's probably other possibilities, right, of other containers that either we don't know yet or that can be just as vital to creating health and wholeness for people and families. Yeah.
Well, and my kids come from a family that there's actually 9 kids in the family, and they were very insulated for a long time, and so their culture is really of that giant family group, and so being removed from mom and being placed in other houses, they didn't have, most of them, not all of them, most of them didn't have actual positive attachment to mom. They did have positive attachment to that family group. And so like that is their deal. And if I can say, hey, you can be part of this family group, seeing my family and doing whatever, without me saying you have to let go of that attachment, which is what you put your security into, because they've been in multiple homes. Like they can't attach directly to me or my, my space or my family. That's too scary. And these people have been here, positive or negatively, my whole time. So if I can allow them still put their being and their essence and their attachment into that giant family group without saying you have to, feel one way or another about your mom or anybody in that space, and you can still be part of our daily functioning, they can still live in that. And then they can decide if they want to, reattach differently or get some parental attachment to me or, which takes some time, but you have to be open to it, right? So I can't just be like, well, we should never talk to those people or talk about those people or do those things because it's hard, or I don't know things, or it's scary, or you shouldn't like them, or whatever the other things, people might say, which I get a lot from caseworkers. Like they shouldn't, talk to these people because these people were bad to them. Sure. But let's look at where their attachment lies and how they're using that and, those things. And I don't always get agreed with by people, and I have to listen to a lot of people in this system still.
Well,
that's fine.
But you have to be pretty resourced and pretty aware on a higher level to be able to function like that for other people. And not many people are there.
No,
what I
right.
mean? Thing that you're able to offer, and most people, even within the system that want to help and are trying to help, are not really able to as neutrally hold space as you're saying, that you're I don't see it as neutral, it's actually loving, but to be able to not have all this stuff that you're projecting on the kids or expecting about attachment, or it's just that you're able to have this more open lens about attachment has created a different framework, and that's amazing. Yeah.
I have a friend, his name's Nick. He's Native American, and he was raised by a very strict white Protestant family, and never has no idea who his real mom is. Like, ended up getting adopted through some like Christian agency who, like, according to him, like, I don't think he would lie about this because his parents seem like that kind of people. They basically give the mothers money for their kids. Like, here, like, we'll give you $1,500, $300, $3,500, or whatever. And then they take them and they put the kids in good Christian homes. And like, it's terrible to see their influence on Nick. He's so racist against other Native American people. Like, he's always talking about how they're whiny bitches, like blah, 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 blah. And like, I mean, it's like, and then, because I've known him for almost 30 years. Like, I've spent time in his house. You know what I mean? Like, we kind of grew up in our late teens and 20s together. And it's his parents. Like, his parents are like Civil War and like frontier buffs and like all they watch is the stuff about the onward Christian soldier, you know what I mean? And it's like they've kind of indoctrinated his Native Americanness out of him. You know what I mean? It's
Well,
kind
yeah.
of weird.
And
Well,
to some
and-
extent, probably his he has to choose now, right? Like I can't have both if this group of people who clearly love and care about me are all the, so like I've gotten this parental attachment to this space. Now I can't have my cultural attachment. I have to let it go completely because it would break my other attachment. So, if we could recognize that both can exist and both need to be nurtured, potentially his parents could have done that differently. I am sure that they thought they needed to cultivate this attachment to our, values and et cetera. And those things are important for other reasons. And, again, all of the old research is on all parent attachment and not this other idea. So we can really understand. Yeah. Yes. Well,
He's a really bad alcoholic, really bad heroin addict. And so all through his high school years, he wanted to learn more about his culture. And they just denied him at every turn, everything. And then when he finally got his driver's license in his own car, he would start going to different Native American things around the state. They started taking his car away from him, punishing him, because they said that his people were savages. That anybody who didn't believe that their God wasn't worth knowing, that they were all going to hell. And it really messed him up. You know what I mean?
Well, and I was thinking about that when you were talking about culture, this cultural container, I'm sure there's a spiritual container also that can act as that bigger nurturing presence, I guess, in someone's life. Yeah.
Well, and with Nick's case and things like the identity development there that he was just not allowed to explore, right? So if we shut people down on their identity development, which honestly has a lot to do with us allowing them to explore other identities that they're not part of, so that they understand that differences aren't better, aren't worse, they are just something that exists, right? So we're not better than other people and we're not worse. And if we let people explore those identities, it doesn't really help when we shush children from mentioning that somebody's in a wheelchair or somebody's Black. We're always like, shh, the other person doesn't know that they're Black or in a wheelchair. I'm pretty sure they already know. Pretty sure it's going to be okay if the kid brings it up. But when we shush them, kids are like, oh gosh, that's a bad thing. I get shushed for bad things. So it's clearly not good that they are, differently abled, or that they're, but there's some other race or there's some other culture, or they're wearing a hijab or whatever the deal is. And we don't let kids talk about it. That to them means it's not okay. It's not okay to talk about. It's not, okay to be. And that doesn't help them then be able to explore who they need to be. And what parents should, if it's really hard for parents to think, well, if I let them explore their transgender, thoughts and ideas, then they're going to turn out to be somebody who I don't understand and I don't know what to, how to relate to them and all those things. It is much more likely if you let them explore that they will feel comfortable coming back to where they actually need to settle. If you don't let them explore that and it is a something that they have questions about, whatever it is, then they are much more likely to end up in that space and not feel like they can come back and settle into where they need to be, where they should be. They're going to stay in that rebellious space because coming back is too scared. If coming back is where they need to be, going forward might need to be where they need to be. I don't know where it is they need to be. But if parents, truly want them to end up, I think a lot of parents say, well, they're not really that, whatever it is. Goth and emo are good examples too. Transgender is kind of what's happening right now with a lot of discussions, but it used to be, can't be, I don't know, used to be, can't be like rock and roll.
Yeah. Or a hippie.
People that's whatever, right? You can't be a hippie, you can't be whatever it is. Whatever it used to be, those things, can't let people explore that or they will end up being X, Y, and Z. Again, we don't know where people need to end up with their identity, but if you don't let them openly explore it so they can talk to you about it, then they're not going to be able to listen to what your ideas are on those values. And they're much more likely to get stuck there, wherever it is they don't need to be, because it's not safe to go to the other space. So if you really want them to, end up who they truly are, you have to let them explore who they might not be, and that be okay. and you be a safe place for them to talk about that and figure that out. And that is much more likely to get them to a place where they're good and safe. There's so many statistics on the amount of suicides on, used to be just LGBT community, but now it's, mostly in transgender communities where most of that research lies right now, just because they don't feel safe figuring that stuff out. So denying the ability to look at your identity is an actual suicide risk, as opposed to allowing people to do that genuinely saves lives.
Well,
So
imagine it would be a high indicator for addiction and alcoholism later too. Like I know I've sponsored a dozen homosexual men who the reason they turned to drinking and drugs was because they felt ashamed and didn't want to come out. So they drank this blah, 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 same old story, just another trauma. But like, I would imagine that there's a lot of addiction and alcoholism that comes out of the foster care system.
A lot of that, a lot of suicide, a lot of not being able to function in life and have supports and attachment and blah, 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 because again, their attachments have been, cut off so much. And we didn't recognize or give them this opportunity to have this cultural attachment. You can find that so that they have a community that, doesn't have to be this family. It's really hard for kids to say, it's not this other family, it's you. That's super hard to say. That kind of sucks. And also if those last people sucked, either my bio parents or my last foster family, then what makes it so you aren't going to suck? But taking that personally about you that's not what it's about. It's about, let's find them a safe place for that attachment to land. And then they can build other good attachments too. And maybe that will be to you. And that's cool. But, for kids who can't trust for good reason in one person, let's allow them to attach culturally to a community. But that means you got to be open to their community not being your community, because it might not be. And that being okay. And, just really wanting what's best for them might not be you. And that doesn't mean you're bad. It's just they need something different.
Is this potentially a new concept in connection, like a way of socially connecting that we have not been practicing as, I'll say as Americans? I can't really speak for the rest of the world, but we're pretty disjointed. We're pretty cut off from culture. We're pretty cut off from each other. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Cultural attachment is definitely a much newer area of research. And actually most of the science that I've read about it that I like comes from Canada. So it's, I don't think it's real hard for how our policies and how our view of our own personal history is for Americans to say, until more recently, that multiculturalism as something to celebrate, it's something to put, we've definitely been in the boat of something to put up with and be colorblind to, whatever that color isn't necessarily just skin color, but everybody is the same. Everybody is the same is not the same as I'm going to celebrate your differences. That's not, and we aren't good at that because we have been so bad at writing rules for, writing systems for, creating space for anything that's different. We teach that difference is not good, from young ages, and being a social outlier is not going to work. So, when all of our systems are set up for white men and being a social outlier doesn't work and you're not a white man, you got to try to conform. That's the other thing. Then we taught them how to conform and not to think critically. And now we're stuck in a space where that doesn't work for so many people because it turns out we're not white men, middle class white men for that matter. And so then what, And what do? We don't have those tools because nobody ever taught them to us. So it's tough in this society because our systems just really weren't ready to be introspective about that until very recently. And then I would say only about, 25, 35, maybe % of the time are we willing to do that. So we got to be willing to look at ourselves and say, this isn't about us being bad. This is about everybody being awesome and the different ways that they're awesome and differences being okay, etc. So big task.
seems like a uphill battle, because like when you have like people like yourself who are in the field that you're in, trying to minimize the differences and like, accentuate the beauty of the differences, but then, like ultimately we're all the same, and then you have mainstream media that is just all about division, like all about division. It's all about red and blue and cis versus trans and gay versus straight. Like, you know what I mean? And it's like, it's so
divisive.
Yeah,
It's
divisive.
just, yeah.
It's terrible. But like, and I thought about this. I remember we talked about this last time, but like this whole cultural attachment thing is like, it's why gangs work.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's when you, and like, I didn't know my real father, so this is not a cultural or racial slur in any way. Where I'm from, the hood that I'm from, like most of us didn't know our real parents, our real fathers. You know what I mean? Like I met my real mom when I was like 13. You know what I mean? But that was for a weekend. Then I spent like a few months with her over the next few years. But like the group that I hung around with, it's because we were the only male figures in our lives. You know what I mean? And we hung out and idolized our older brothers who were in these gangs. You know what I mean? Like, and I kind of stayed away from the gang life just because I didn't like being told what to do. But I had a lot of gangbanger friends, a lot of gangster disciples, four corner hustlers, vice lords, Simon City Royals, and they're more loyal to their gang than they are to their families, except for their moms. You know what I mean? Like there's something about moms. You know what I mean? Like boys and their moms, thugs and their moms. The harder the boy, the more he loves his mom, because mom's always the one that's going to be there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, usually mom's the greatest enabler.
Yeah,
usually,
like you say, my mom. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, when you don't have attachments or appropriate attachments or healthy attachments, I might love mom. I might think she's always going to be there, but either that mom's working 3 jobs that doesn't allow for much attachment, or, mom possibly is on drugs and that's not a good attachment, or mom, is trying real hard, but they're 6 or 7 children. I don't know. Like there's a lot of reasons where attachment just doesn't happen as much.
just doing single parenting.
Yeah.
Right. Again, like none of these there's no judgment in any of those sentences, but
Yeah, no,
where do you find that attachment? You find that cultural, space. And for sure, gang culture. It's why, breakdancing started in New York, is because the people trying to diffuse gangs started to say, we're like, well, we'll just have dance battles instead of shootout battles. And people are like, I can identify with that. That's all they needed. They just needed identity things. They didn't actually need to kill people. So, then they all made their little dance identities, and then we made a whole new kind of dancing. B-boys, that was the whole deal. So can't bring a gun to the dance fight. So, like there's a whole, again, like that super dance music, those things are all, super tied to cultural connections. And that's what they needed, was cultural identity connections in that space. And we just, you can change what the gang culture does if you change what the point of the gang is. They just need their homies. They need their, their power in that, their personal power in being part of something. And there are lots of ways to change that without having people have to leave the gang. Just change the point of the gangs. But we're not going to do that with how policing is viewed. We're not going to do that with how, you have to atone for your sins. There needs to be justice, not retribution, not maybe I can do better, not second chances, not, maybe I can use this piece of me that now I've learned from to be better for other people and to show them a different path. So it's tough.
Gangs aren't going to change their MOs until there's no drug culture. That's
sure.
the number one.
I'm not saying that that's an easy task. I'm just saying that there's a different view.
I absolutely agree. But that's one of the, like people who are for decriminalizing drugs and like ending the war on drugs. It's because you're creating an entire culture by making it illegal, especially in this country. The United States consumes 80% of the illegal narcotics manufactured in the world.
Drug culture is a thing,
Yep.
like there are spaces, there are rules, there are, underlying norms that you have to kind of know. I mean, there's no, like, I don't know anything about drugs really. I could not like go find the place to consume them and do it correctly. If I couldn't just do that. I don't know the rules of that space. I don't know that culture. I would have a whole bunch of stuff to learn because it is an entire culture, they would definitely be like, you crazy outsider.
Well, no, but you definitely have experience with alcoholism, which, you know what I mean? That's how we met, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Through a friend of yours, who hopefully is doing well. He hasn't responded to any of my texts yet, but he might not have his phone.
I don't know.
That's
So hard to not know.
They could
Really hard
neither
to not know.
deny that he was there, which I think is hilarious. I think I was totally afraid of the foster care system because I had
Oh, so was I. Like, I was like,
Yeah.
no way. That is the one thing that I won't.
well, and I had 6 or 7 friends who were in foster care in my hometown, and they were from North Jersey. I'm from way down by Delaware, and these kids were from way up by New York, and where I'm from, CPS is called DIFUS, Division of Youth and Family Services, and at least when I was a kid, teenager, their thing was oh, if you're from an abusive home, we're just going to take you completely out of your environment, take you to the whole other side of the state, and put you where you can just meet all new people. And it's man, don't you fucking know how mean kids are? Kids hate the new kid. You know what I'm saying? Plus I heard all these stories, where they would come to school wearing the most ratty clothes, and the food that they ate was shit, and they got beat all the time. And I'm I got that at home. You know what I mean? I don't need to go somewhere else for that. That's why when my dad kicked me out when I was 12, I made a promise not to tell anybody. It was our secret because I didn't want the school to find out and be oh, call somebody. You know what I mean? And you heard the most horrible stories. I heard stories about kids getting raped and molested, and it's oh my God. Our part of our goal for our homestead and our property is to provide a space for at-risk teens and young adults to learn how to permaculture and greenhouse grow vegetables and stuff. But we'd eventually like to get to a spot where we have a couple 2-person bungalows with a community house for young adults transitioning out of foster care who don't really have anywhere to go. You know what I mean? There's a lot of them here in Colorado, and I'm actually going to be talking to a guy here in the next couple of weeks about looking for investors to start one here and then having one in every state. So that
I used to work for a program in Boston called Shortstop, and it was for 18 to 22-year-olds. It was, basically a homeless shelter, but for 18 to 22-year-olds, they had a myriad of situations, a lot of refugee type situations, and then, from foster care situations for sure, and just different, some LGBT, parents kicking out type things. But it was a really good program. I mean, it was super helpful to those kids for sure. And one I still keep in touch with on Facebook has his master's and doing cool stuff. And he got real mad at me once because I cleaned up his room for the carpet cleaning people. And the white social workers in Haiti used to just come in and take all your stuff. And they treat it like garbage and, do whatever. And I didn't know that. And the carpet cleaner people were coming, and I needed to get the things off of his floor, and he worked and went to school and didn't have time, and had missed the announcement. And so I put all his stuff on his bed, including his trash can, and he lost his mind. And I was like, you are 100% right. That is on me. I was, trying to be helpful, but I did that incorrectly for you in your, in your space. And obviously we fixed it, did the thing, but that's, but we have to be able to recognize and be I was trying to do the right thing, and I didn't do it for what you come from the space you come from, and from what is important value wise. You do not put trash cans on people's beds. It's not a thing, because that, feels like you're treating them like trash. I it didn't occur to me, but I haven't lived those experiences. But we have to be okay with looking at ourselves and saying, hey, not cool. Like I can change. I wasn't trying to be a jerk, but I was a jerk. Like it's still true. That's still what happened. So
I used to work at this mushroom farm down in Alamosa here in Colorado. And the way they grow the mushrooms, they're like these like 4 or 5 stacked bunk beds that they just have all this dirt in. And like to pick the mushrooms, they just take a 2x4 and there's like a lip that's about an inch on each side of the bed. And they have 2 2x4s and they start with one and they stand on a 2x4. They pick the mushrooms and then they take the other one and go higher, step up onto it and take the other one with it, and they keep going. But they're all short. They're all from like Guatemala, and they don't have running water there. Like most of them have never, until they came to the United States, had never seen running water outside of like a hospital or like a shopping mall or something like that. And every time break's over, you go for each shift, you go into the bathroom and there's just piles of toilet paper from them going to the bathroom and wiping and putting it on the floor next to it. Because apparently, like when they're first hired, they have to be told, no, you have to poop in the toilet because they don't want to poop in clean water.
It's totally,
it's like it's like blasphemous to them. They're like, dude, we can drink this and you want us to poop in it and then throw these shitty paper in it? You know what I'm saying? It's weird. Yeah, I saw that. Well, hey, it was really good having you on. Thanks for redoing this with us.
For sure.
Totally appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And it's awesome because this isn't the normal kind of show we do, but it's totally relevant. You know what I mean? Like
it's important information.
Absolutely, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't want to just be like an addiction recovery podcast. We want to be a recovery podcast for people who are healing. And what you're doing, big healing work. Just with them 4 girls, who I've met, they're 4 beautiful young ladies. They're so nice.
I'm lucky.
So inquisitive. They had so many questions when I was working over there. But thank you so much for coming on, and I hope everybody feels better.
Yeah, quick recovery.
They're getting there. I'm always happy to talk, and there's other subjects, and if I can be helpful to anybody out there, let me know for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much, and you have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Thank you. You too. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We appreciate your support. We talk about a lot of sensitive topics on this show. If anything that we talk about has triggered you or caused a reaction, or you need to reach out and talk to somebody, you can reach us at nolovepodcast.com. Feel free to reach out to us there. You can comment on the show, or you can follow any of the links in the show notes if we're not someone that you need to talk to, if you need to talk to a professional. Thank you very much. If you give us a like, if you like the show, give us a like, give us a follow. For uncut, unedited programs, you can follow us on Patreon. Thank you for your support. Namaste.